Very nice, Malcolm. You take care of yourself and I hope you'll carry on. Okay. As I said, we've got two gentlemen here, so I'll let them start. And if there's anything else after to say, I'll let you know and support the Malcolm straw. Thank you all very much for coming. Okay. Right, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's me, Steve. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you all for staying awake. Got the names here in the last watch. Stay awake this time. Because you're here to enjoy yourself. What happened was that some weeks ago I was sitting kind of half watching television and there was this thing came on. Very interesting program, man in the desert, Land Rover of course, Range Rover, and driving around the desert, and they came upon this beautiful castle which had been built like 5,000 years ago. And he said, you know how they all terribly interesting and beautifully preserved ruin, like ourselves. And beautifully preserved ruin. And he said the tragedy of it is that there is no record of their civilization because there is no written record. And I said to myself, that's like Lossie. Very soon, folk will come here and they'll come to a deserted aerodrome, a deserted harbour, some ruins, and they'll say, I wonder what this place was. I wonder what this place was. And they'll go to Elgin, because Elgin will still be there, they'll still get the money. They'll go to the library there and say, is there a book about Lossie Mouth? Oh no, just pictures. Nothing serious about the history of Lossie Mouth. So I'm serious about the history of Lossie Mouth. Stephen is serious about the history of Lossie Mouth because I'm going to try and extract from you some history. And he's going to write it up after. Joan falls for these things. Okay, so if you're not from Lossie, you may find this a teeny weeny bit boring, but then you've sat through boring things before. You will be. I can remember the beginning of the war when we sat there and we listened to Mr. Chamberlain say that no such assurance has been received, and as a consequence this country is now at war with Germany. And we didn't came with that man. I was in, I think, Miss Innes's class. Say Miss Innes. Take the belt from Miss Innes. I used to get the belt for my writing in Miss Innes's class. And now it occurs to me to ask, if I couldn't write when my hand was in a sayer, how did you think I was going to improve? Yes, it was. Anyway, that was the start of the war as far as we were concerned. Although, of course, many of you know the war had really started a year earlier when we started to build the drome. The drome started. It was the farms were commandeered in 1938, January 1938, and this notion that's very convenient when people talk on television that Britain arrived on the 3rd of September 1939 totally unprepared for war ain't true. I mean, we had been preparing for war for 18 months before the war actually started. And some of you will remember that by then we had ARP, air raid precautions, and we had men going around telling you put strips of paper on your windows so that they didn't blow with a blast. And what I'm finding now is you begin to realise that we're right beside the school. I've never been in it, but we're right beside the school, and there's bairns there that have never seen a fish landed. So again, what you're speaking about when you speak about the fishing, you know, and their parents have left there, never saw a fish landed. So now you've got primary schools and they're full of parents that care nothing about Lossie because it was never recorded. And of course, they're very probably being taught by people who don't belong to Lossie, so that they have very little connection with the town. Anyway, so that's why Stephen's going to do this hard work and ruin his winter. I hope he doesn't get promotion. We want you to stay. We want you to stay here. 20 years from now, you can go and take over the National Library of Scotland. But until then, right, so what I wanted to do was to say there are plenty of stories in Lossie about various things. So how do you start? Well, you could start with somebody who's here. Lossie, we had Air Force. Everybody kens we had Air Force. A lot of folk eventually say we had the Navy. Don't forget we had soldiers.
Of course we had.
There were soldiers came here, and some of the soldiers came here and drove up the brae, up the school brae, St Gerardine's Road, and stopped just beside the newly built kirk, and they were going to go in to turn the Laverick Bank into an officers' mess for the soldiers, officers. And they stopped, and they were going to have a wee drag. But nobody did any matches. So, a man called Ernest Pemberton walked across the road to number 38, chapped on the door and said, he was Liverpudlian, and I can't really remember, any chance of a light for my cigarette? So of course, he got a light for his cigarette and the box of matches, and he came in and he got his tea, and he got, maybe even got currant loaf. I think in your route when you get currant loaf. Right. Mrs. Stewart was the lady who provided the tea. Were you actually there, Emma? Aye, but were you actually in the house when they came? This was my brother-in-law. He went on to marry my sister Helen. And every time he came up, the first thing that he would do was he'd go and see Martha to say thank you for looking after us when we came here. The soldiers came, they used the Laverick Bank first of all, and then eventually soldiers were in huts that were built down at the beach bar. I can remember when they arrived, the lorry arrived with these huts, and they started to take the sections off, and we were piling them up there, and we were helping. Telling you, Hitler would have won, didn't he? We were helping to move these things, and the soldier said to me, he said, "Have you got a sister?" I looked at him, I think, "Sister? They're nice for lifting." And I said, "Yes, I've got a sister." I said, "Well, go and get her." Realised now, of course, what they wanted, somebody to mark the tea. But you see, there were these huts down below, down the beach bar. How many huts were there? Where were they? There's no trace of them now. There was an ablutions block, which was down beside the toilet. Toilet? What toilet? The toilet's gone. You know, everything down there has changed. And, you know, that's what I'm trying to say to folk, is none of that seems to have been recorded at all. They used to go and get their dinner down at what is now the mission. What used to be the mission. That was the kitchen, Hell's Kitchen it was always referred to down there, so I don't know whether the food was that bad. But that, you know, that's how the army operates. You've got bide-in bits and you've got ablutions blocks. You always had ablutions, you didn't wash yourself. You were abluted. So there we are, you know. There are things there that have never been recorded. I said to somebody, oh no, I remember, Brucey Stewart was digging up the square, remember? When he was doing the improvements, and he was digging away at this bit opposite Johnny Anderson's, Wilkinson's, the baker. And I said to Bruce, I said, how are you getting on there? He says, oh, it's getting hard work. I says, are you making any of the concrete there? He says, what concrete? I said, for the air raid shelters. For the air raid shelters, he says. There were 2 air raid shelters there. Air raid shelters designed to take about 50 folk, if I remember rightly. I think there was a magic figure there. And there was one side, one on the other, and down opposite the Regal was a great big tank of water. I think it was 25,000 gallons, it said. And there was a net at the top to stop loonies getting drunk. Cats been through it. I like dogs. Okay, so there was lots of things like that that went on that appeared to be unrecorded. And it would only, you find a few of them if you go back through the Northern Scot. But it's quite hard work, because the Northern Scot was never that interested in Lossie. Somebody said to me a long time ago that if a farmer wanted to get his name in the Northern Scot, he sold a coo. If a Lossie man wanted to get his name in the paper, he had to sink a boat. And it's just round about it, because Lossie hardly ever appeared in that. There was a great big bit about the price of the coos being sold in the mart, and about every 6 months there would be a report of the fishing, as though it hadn't taken place. So there were loads of things happened during the war. There were people who ran concerts to raise money. How much do you raise?
Altogether? Oh, of course I don't know, but it's all handed in. I'm anything from £4 upwards, that's when I had the library.
Am I right in thinking you got David Powers to sing one time?
Play for Dad, I was a singer.
I'm not going to ask him in case he tries. But you see, there were people who were doing things, raising money during the war, because we would have these weeks where you had to raise £5,000 to buy a Spitfire. I'm not sure what tornadoes cost, but I think you need to have quite a few concerts. So there were lots of things going on during the war. There were, and again, trying to convey this to young people, that the way that Lossie operated during the war. So we had folk up the stair. You speak about up the stairs. We had folk up the stair from the start of the drone. First couple that came in 1939, and Aunt Janet still had folk up the stair when the Navy were started to build the houses up here, which I think was 1955 or round about there, that kind of time. But there's no record of the fact that the RAF was actually involved with the town. And if you speak to them out there, they're totally unaware of the fact that the town and the drome were like that. We had David from Dunfermline for several years. David went down to Willie Youngson's to get his haircut. Went down at tea time, 5 o'clock, and at 7 o'clock his wife came and chopped at the door and said, I'm very worried about David. He went out to get his haircut and he hasn't come back. It was 7:30 or something like that. What am I going to do about it? So I was sent down to Willie's to see if he'd had his haircut. Chopped the door and Willie said, what do you want? How did you get here? And I said, there's a man came down to get his haircut. I says, there's half a dozen still here. Because that's how it was during the war. That you didn't go and do something and come back. You went and waited. You stood in the queue, you waited, whatever it was. You went to the butchers, you stood in the queue. You did Alexander's, you did Isabella's to get fancies, you stood in the queue. And there are lots of these things that is so hard to convey to young folk nowadays, because they look at you so you're all in field. That's not true, So there you are, that's how I got into this business of trying to get folk to tell me there's no point in me. I think it's Sandy last week saying he was giving you his memories of the war. It's pure coincidence that you're two Stuarts and I don't want my memories of the war. I want Stephen to have my memories and your memories and Adam Campbell's memories and everybody else's memories thrown in. If you mind something during the war, I think we could make a decent bit of history of Lossie and make the place sound interesting so that when they come back and they find the ruins of the aerodrome there, and, what do you reckon, 5 years? Anyway, when they come back, they'll be able to say, oh yes, there was a civilization here. And of course, the people like that will say, yes, there was a civilization here of sorts. But it depends how well he likes it up. So what I'm wanting is for folk to tell me things that they mind that happened during the war. See, when I said there was huts down at the beach bar, a lot of folks said, oh, I mind that. How many huts were there, roughly? How many air raid shelters were there in the girls' playground in the school? How many were there in the boys' playground in the school?
3. Janet's Street.
And the Queens?
I think we're 3.
3? 3? Any advance on 3 on your 3? Magic number. 3?
Some older than me, but I can mind in 3.
In the lounge bit, there was one at the woodwork.
That's right.
And there was one across beside the Lavies.
That's right.
And there was one beside Dr. Jessup's.
Do it.
So I think there was only 3 in the playground, but then there was more up in the playing field.
The bar. The houses
There
are
was one sideways on, and then there were 3 together lengthways, I think. But then, somebody may well have a 40. 40? And the 40s. And they must have demolished some of these shelters. They must have demolished some of these shelters to make the canteen. When the school canteen was built, they must have demolished the shelters first. And then I can mind John McDonald standing at the back of the shelter there. Okay, so there's things like that, and the canteen. Some of you must have had school dinners. How much did they cost? I think they were a penny when they started. I think they were a penny when they started, and they were eventually 6pence. And me personally, I can remember we used to get our dinner there, and then we'd run home and get our dinner, and then we'd run back up again and hear a game of football. So God knows what our stomachs were like for the rest of the afternoon. But I mean, that was how our life was lived then. And funnily enough,
Is a 3-course meal?
2.
Did you get soup?
Yeah, they got soup and main and Ganges mud for the pudding. We didn't have a pie, just ordinary. Speaking about living high, this story has nothing to do with the war really. My sister simply was very envious of a cousin round the corner because the cousin round the corner, they got sausages several times a week, whereas we had fish. If your father was to see, you had fish and fish and fish and fish and fish, and then on Sunday you got sausages. So there's no fish. Like an overseas fish. So there we are. But again, you see, speaking about fishing, how did fishing operate? Because for a start, there were controls put on. There was controls put on for the price, so that so the nation couldn't be held at ransom by my father, who had served in the First World War, just a matter of interest. the control, if I remember rightly, stayed on till about 1950, 48 or something. That there was a maximum price that you could sell fish for to protect folk in the south from us robbers in the north here. So, but the boats, there were two kinds of boats. There was old boats and newer boats, and the newer boats were commandeered. How many of them were commandeered? Which boats were commandeered? When they came back, were they as good as when they went? What did they do during the time they were away? So, Scapa Flow, you said?
Scapa Flow. I went to Scapa Flow, then I went to the South Island.
Funnily enough, my father went to Scapa Flow with our drifter in the First World War because what they needed was wee bogies to pop in and out to the battleships. Battleships didn't lie alongside piers. What they did was they were anchored out and the boats would sail in and out with crews. So that was it. Now another thing that came up just a short time ago, some of the people were called up, some of the women were called up. Eleanor's sister and my sister went off to the ATS together. I think there's a photo of them setting up together. So there were people who went to the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, but there were also people who went to the ATS, as it was then, the WRAC they are now. There were people who went to the Wrens, and we had loads of wharfs in Lossie, because the Stockfield and the Marine were taken over to house the wharfs, and one or two other, Borough Westra was, I can't mind some of the other big houses.
I called it Lipstick Villa, Skerry Bay.
Skerry Bray, but Skerry Bray I think was for officers, wasn't it?
Well, the Lipstick Villa.
Aye, Lipstick Lodge. It was Lipstick Lodge.
Was Raid.
Aye. But we also had, what else do we have that I mentioned? The Land Army. And some of you will probably be able to remember George McBain's daughter. I can't remember her first name. And she strode along there in her jug purse. Did you have jug purse? Did you have jug purse?
Yes,
Yeah, you can just sit and imagine that now.
And green jumpers.
Green jumpers.
And natural coloured shirts.
Right. So there you are, a lot of people did a lot of different things during the war.
Thank you.
You know, and so little has ever been recorded that their own family will not know. You know, that their family will be unaware. Your family came that you raised money to buy a Spitfire? No? Aye. Didn't tell them. Your family, Sandra came that Ernie used to come and visit you. You know, these they're not important stories like, you know, what's important stories anyway? These are stories which to me are as important in making the war real. It affected real people. It wasn't about Spitfires zooming. It wasn't about submarines blowing up things. It was about real people changing their lives entirely. You know, entirely to suit the war effort. And when they spoke about us being all in it all together, as the man says nowadays, that was pretty well true then. Of course there were shirkers, there was ice shirkers. I'm sure there was black market that I didn't know anything about, because I don't think my father would have stooped to buy anything in the black market. Men, you know, like that, your father wouldn't have bought anything in the black market. You know, so that when you look back to try to convey to bairns at the school nowadays what Lossie was like at that time, Lossie was very different. The world was very different, of course. This was a field, because this was a field that Hughie Kellis never managed to grow anything on. And there was a hole along at the end there where there was high water, and that along by the goalposts there, because it was below sea level.
That's right. The house was up the knees.
And they used to say that house just out of the road there, you can buy that because sewage was a problem for them. You know, So obviously a lot of these things have been sorted. And of course that bit of road didn't exist. There was just a pathy there. And funnily enough, I went today on my way here, I did a piece of archaeological research. I went along to see the name of Mr. Salmon's house, the manse. Hadn't I got the name? There's no name on the gate and there's no name on the house. I wanted, because somebody had asked me something about Tulloch's Brae. That's where Tulloch lived. Mr. Tulloch was the minister for 30 odd years, and that was Tulloch's manse, and the brae ran up the side there from Elgin Road up to Stockfield.
Which was called Lovers Lane.
Lovers Lane. How do you know that? Strike that from the record. But you know, when you look back as you went up that lane, what was there on either side of the lane there? Fine banks, but after you got the bit where folk could see you, we had listen huts up there. And what were the listen huts used for? The poles started there, and then the poles left Lossie. We have a photo of the poles marching out of Lossie. And what else was up there eventually?
Folk lived in them after that.
Aye, but before folk lived in them, before the war finished, what was in them? No. There were prisoners of war up there.
Got it.
There were Italian prisoners of war up there, which some of us mind only too well. So stop smiling. They weren't handsome. I seen Victor. So, you know, a lot of these things up the top there, that was nissen huts, carved one. And one of the nissen huts stayed on quite a long time in Lossie. Whereabout?
The line. There was a Dean Terrace as well.
What was it?
There was a Dean Terrace as well. Listen,
Was there? Aye. See, I was out of Lossie for a long time. I left Lossie effectively in 1950 and came back in 1990. So there were things that happened in Lossie that I ken nothing about. I didn't ken when the, when were the shelters demolished at the school? When were the shelters demolished at the square? How long did we leave some of these things before we did anything about it? We can find when the concrete blocks were removed from the beach. Most of the concrete blocks, but not all, of course, because all you've got to do is to look to see when Tommy Stewart was killed. Brian Stewart's brother Tommy was killed when one of the concrete blocks toppled onto him as they were trying to clear. Those of you who've forgotten what concrete blocks look like, if you go across the lighthouse, you can still see concrete blocks across there, and on the top of them you can see things which are written, and amongst the things that are written are Flan Fire Progeli Than Flantasilio Go Go Go.
Can you spell it?
Okay, so that's maybe a slight hint that these particular concrete blocks were made by people from a certain part of the world. Wales. It was a Welsh pioneer group that created the concrete blocks across there. Aided and abetted, as I keep on telling you, if it hadn't been for me, Hitler would have won. We were out there because before they built the concrete blocks, they had to have flat stones to put down at the bottom to stop the concrete running into the sand. So we were up and doing, delivering. If you go out there, look at the bottom, and you'll find that there's usually about a dozen lozenge kind of sandstones that are there on the bottom of the concrete blocks. And then they pour the concrete into the formers there. And when you look at the job, you think, how much would you need to pay somebody nowadays to take a barrow load of cement out of the bench there, down, along, and one time that I was out there, we, as I said, well, of course that's what you did, wasn't it? There's no television, and you only got the Dandy and the Beano, alternate weeks, I think, at that time. So that was our entertainment. The truth is, telling you, to us the war was entertainment. Loonies were stupid. They're still stupid today. I think the Quines realised that war meant death for somebody. We thought war meant glory for somebody. So Loons and Quines probably saw the war different. Certainly men and women saw the war. And you think nowadays they say the relatives have been informed, whereas several of the men that were lost from Lossie, the relatives didn't find out for years that the person had been killed. What was their names? Levax. Levax had the bungalow at the top of the school brae. They were in France when the Germans came in because his wife was French and he was working in France. They were interned and they weren't released from the concentration camp till 1946, and it was only then that they discovered that their son had died in 1944. So you look at what's happening and you think, well, some things are different. Better, okay. Better's have a hard to judge a lot of the time, isn't it? So there we are. These are the kind of things that I'm wanting you to dig out and tell me the things that you mind, the things that you're prepared to tell. Nothing about the Italian prisoners of war. We'll leave that till after. But what we would like is to be able to produce a book that he does all the work and I get at least half the credit. That's fair, isn't it? So, does anybody remember anything about the war that would be interesting, would you think, to tell school children nowadays what the war was like? Because as far as they're concerned, it was just long ago. To be honest, I don't think we were that interested in the First World War that our fathers had been in, and they never spoke about it. Father never mentioned the war. His brother was killed in France, and we had a notice there from the King saying thank you and goodbye. I forget what it actually said, glorious dead or something. And there was a medal that you got, but my father never mentioned Uncle Jock. And you look back and you think that's such a shame, isn't it? They tell us, what was he like? What was he like? I would have liked to ken what Uncle Jock was like. Probably to be handsome, of course, being a spreadsheet. certainly wouldn't have had curly hair. Things are anything to go by. But you see, I hope that Cathy will maybe look back in her records and tell us how much she raised at each of the...
I've got a letter with Churchill, and one for the Duke of the nation. I've got them.
Oh, yeah, you see. And, folk didn't realise that these things were done.
It's only a wee concert that the Barton had. Once went into big concerts, I think the war was finished, was it there?
And again.
2 years ago. Wait.
That's you. But there were a number of folk who had concerts. We used to have concerts down in the fish market, and we used to. People used to sing. I can remember Johnny Campbell, who later became a doctor, singing boiled beef and carrots. I think it's funny the things that stick in your memory, isn't it? This was the same John Campbell who helped to guide us When there was an aeroplane that crashed down at the Hythe, the wing fell off and landed on the 17th fairway. It was a golf course. And it crashed there, and the entire crew was killed, and a man swimming out to try to rescue them was drowning as well. But the next day, we went into the recycling business and went down there and got a belt of ammunition, took it up to Nellie Wood's shed, and pulled out the bullets, threw the bullets away. They were no use for anything. The bullets were no use, and emptied out the cordite. Because the cordite was awful good for starting fires down the rocks. So we knew that, because cordite being washed ashore was a very common thing before the war, because the fleet would come up and sail round about the Firth there to impress the Germans, and they fired off star shells, and these things would fall into the water and be half burnt, and we would get these sticks of cordite. The navy cordite was about the thickness of a pencil, whereas the bullet cordates was about the thickness of a pencil lead, quite thin stuff. But it was awful good for starting fires with bile buckets and things like that. 3 throws, wasn't it? 3 throws. You had to boil the buckets, let them cool, boil them again, and then boil them again, so that you killed off the bacteria. Spoiled the taste. We also fried limpets as well. In fact, during the war, we used to organise metal hunts along the rocks there, organised by one Johnny Raw, who was supposed to be very clever, Johnny. But Johnny got the money for the stuff that we collected. We used to go along and pick up bits and take them along, and Johnny would collect them all together, and he got that. And I have a vague memory that we used to have rat hunts as well. You'd start a fire and the rats would come out. The sewage went down back of the fish sheds there, and the rats would come out and push. It's a pity they missed the Olympics. That just and I think it was alleged that Johnny got threepence for a tail. Aye? And it came, wouldn't it be interesting if we came whether that was true or not? But there was no doubt about it that Johnny, who was supposed to be simple, was the man who got the money, which proves that simple's not just easy to define sometimes. Okay, is anybody prepared to tell us anything? Admit to anything? What's that, Kathy?
Oh, sorry.
We're wanting to hear.
Oh, but that was
Well, of course, I mean, the war actually continued in many ways after 1945, because you still had rationing. I think I still had a ration book when I went through to Aberdeen as a student in the 1950s. And I have a very clear memory when I was a student grouse beating up at Darby of Pete Moe coming round in his van and I bought a Cadbury's Dairy Flake, which was on the market for the first time since the war had started. Up till then, you could actually get ordinary chocolate, but flake, though, I was too fancy. And I can remember buying that, but that was a long time after the war. So, I mean, the war tapered off. The war had kind of different stages. The war for us here kind of finished on the 8th of May, 1945. But 2 weeks later, of course, the war reached Lossie in no uncertain terms. The 20th of May, 1945, at 10:30 on a Sunday morning, the aeroplane crashed into Jock Flood's house, and it killed Jock Flood's wife, Joey, Joey was a teamster, I think.
Aye.
And 5 loons. The oldest of them, the same age as me. He was in the other half of our class, Jackie. And Jackie was a kind of hear him, scare him. Somebody said to him one day, "You're fair to jump into that quarry there, the quarry behind the school that you used to get the belt for going out in." And somebody said to Jackie, "Fair to." And the good news is he only broke the one leg. So, I mean, Jackie was quite hear him, scare him. But, you know, when the plane crashed, that was the entire family wiped out except for
Jean.
Jeannie.
And the father.
Jeannie and her father had been making tea for the rest of them. They'd been in the kitchen and they were the 2 who escaped. So as well as the floods, of course, there was the people downstairs. People in the other, it was the top, wasn't it? Took the top off. And the building has been rebuilt, of course. The building has been rebuilt. And it's been rebuilt exactly the same, apart from one very small detail. Next time you go up that way, look at the next block and you'll see that the corner stains. Kind of bunny blocks there. In the old place, they were full of shells. They used to mix concrete with shelly sand. And in the new one, they must have used pure sand, and it looks quite different. And once you've noticed, you say, "I never came that." In addition, of course, there were people killed in Lossie by the Germans. I mean, that was the ones killed by the RAF, but there were people killed by the Germans in
Dunbar Street.
Dunbar Street. A couple had come up from Portsmouth to escape the bombing down in Portsmouth, and they'd moved in to stay with Jimmy Campbell's granny. Jimmy Campbell, engineer, married to Elsie Mull. And they moved in there into the houses next to the Coast Guard station. And this aeroplane came across and dropped 4 bombs. Number 1 took off the back house of Jimmy Souters, Billy Souter and Dougie Souter, 56 Dunbar Street, and that was rebuilt with concrete blocks after. Billy and Dougie slept through it and had to be wakened up to be rescued. And rescued from what? Rescued from sleep. The next bomb fell on the turret houses next to the Coast Guard station and demolished one of them completely, damaged the other so severely that the people had to move out. The one which demolished was the one with the 2 Wilsons and the 2 Leightons who had come up from the south of England to escape the bombing. They'd come up because the Leightons had a daughter who was married to an RAF officer, and the officer and the lady stayed in James Street with Tuckers. What was the name of the house there? Dunfanaghy or something? No, opposite Uncle Pat's anyway. So you know, there were these things that happened, and you know, he tried to convey this to kids. Say, when I was in the second year senior school in Lossie, we marched up the road behind the floods coffins. School marched up there. There were wreaths which were carried by Ian Boyd and Leslie Roy, and I was in the second row marching up there for the funeral. So there were quite a few funerals, of course, during the war. It's always amazed me that the RAF paid no attention to all the airmen who were buried up there. But you know, there were a lot of people died and were buried up there. So it's really what I'm trying to say to you is there are a whole lot of these things which I personally find interesting because they kind of give an idea of what life was like. The fact that you had to stand for half an hour in Bob the Butcher's and get your ration, and I can't remember what the ration was, and you had to queue up to get, when we went into carries, you had points for tins, and you got so much cheese and so much butter, 2 ounces of butter, is it? Something like that. Half a pan of jam had to do a month, I think. You know, the amounts were not encouraged to, well, people didn't put on weight then. Nobody was fat then. Nobody was... Hard to spike when you're having your breast. So, that's what it's all about. Stephen,
Yes.
tell them what you want.
Everything.
How to do it.
Write it down. And hand it into the library. Or
The
to
library is a place where it's all going to happen.
Darby, apparently.
As I told you, there's no good me trying to write things because Miss Innes was right. I now realise that what was wrong was that my brain was too fast for my fingers. But I never mastered the accommodation pen holder. Do you remember that? Accommodation pen holder. And Miss Grant used to give us spelling every Friday. You had the spelling, and one of the words was always accommodation. And all you had to do was, the trouble was you couldn't hold it there and write with it at the same time. What was the other word that was always in? Privilege. No D. No. You got the belt if you got... Ross Anderson was the same class as me, and when Ross introduced me to and he would say, he was at the top of the class and I was at the bottom. I was never at the top of the class. I had certain defects that... I think it's funny because nowadays somebody introduced me as a historian. I got 5% from Miss Grant. That just goes to show, isn't it, fair? I was against prizes on the grounds that it was only the same folk that got them. Mary Mackenzie, Margaret Lease, Margaret Salmon, James Scott, James Smith, and then I would maybe be about 2 off that. And if they had more prizes, I was still 2 off. I never got a prize till the year I left Lossie. And then I went up to the academy and I never got a prize to the academy till the year I left that. So that was just a slow starter, slow level. Rightio, what have I missed out? I've missed out things. I said to somebody, during the war, we only get to the school half time. For a while,
Yeah, that's right.
never, I said, never. Never.
After the war, the boys were weekly, the morning, and the girls.
Aye. So what happened was that for 1 week, the boys would go in the morning, and the girls in the afternoon, and then the following week they would swap over there. The theory presumably was that if a bomb fell in the school, only queens would be killed. I think there's a flaw in the reasoning. But I mean, that was the case, certainly for 2 terms I think it was. And then they gave it up, unfortunately. Maybe that's why I'd never mastered writing. I was off the week that have showed me how to hold the pen. The problem I had was, I was all right in the downstrokes, but then when you went up, it would catch and then the ink would... and then I would try to rub it. It does not work with ink. Certainly that kind of ink. Mine used to fill ink wells. I mean, there are things that I think are worth recording. When Paris was liberated, what happened when Paris was liberated? Every class that went through Miss Marr's door sang La Marseillaise, and she was on the desk conducting. Miss Marr, lovely, lovely lady. Right? Aye, Poodle. Some of these teachers, you look back, they would actually have liked to be nice to us, except we wouldn't have let them. we didn't didn't think they were on our side. There was some kind of foreign influence that came down. And somebody said something about Jessup to me. I said, I didn't get what he was there for. I used to stand at the junction of the corridors. The one thing he was good at was glaring. And of course the other thing that strikes me when you're speaking about him was if you went up the corridor there past the men's staff room, there was a little hidey hole with the men's staff room, and they all smoked, and the smell was terrible, just absolutely atrocious. The other thing, incidentally, that I'd never realised till they were demolishing the school was that the hall wasn't actually a room. That was a bit between two buildings that they had stuck a roof over, and that's why they had cast iron pillars heading up that side. So that's, I mean, is that not really interesting, that? You'll not sleep the next day.
The roofs they blew off at the moment.
I started the school, and as soon as I started the school, they started to build the new bit, square block there, which I realised when they were demolishing it was actually steel with stains in between. And then there was a gale of wind about 6 months, I think, after the school, that block was opened, and the roof, flat roof, lifted off and plopped down in the playground as neat as you would like, just as though it had been intended to go there. And do you remember walking around that? I was the baby, so we
Kathy was saying something.
Aye? Aye?
And Johnny, we all got a third of a pint of milk, little bottles,
That's right.
every morning.
I have a feeling that before the war we got Horlicks.
After the war.
Before the war.
After the war.
I'm sure I remember getting Horlicks in incidentally, I was recognised, my musical talent was recognised in Miss Forsyth's class, and I played the triangle. It was never recognised again. In fact, in this very room, when I came back to Lossie, I was asked to do something. I forget what it was, and I finished up singing. And at the end of it, another man who was there came up to me and said, "Did you know that there's a class about learning how to sing folk songs up in Elgin on Saturday?" I didn't go. They'll have realised I didn't go.
There's a cemetery in the middle of the camp then, wasn't it? There was a cemetery in the middle of the camp.
Aye, it's still there.
Stains.
The Scottish church system was that you tried to put the kirk and the kirkyard in the middle of the parish, no matter how inconvenient that was for everybody. So in the days when this was just fields and farmers, having the kirk and the school and the cemetery out at Drainey was quite sensible. Once Lossie started to develop, that made a lot less sense, and the folk in Lossie kept on saying, "Well, we're not getting attached yet." And then eventually the presbytery said, "All right then," and they built the little kirk, which was at the end of Church Street. Church Street was called Church Street because it had a church in it, which is still there. The Drill Hall was a church. So if you look at the top of the Drill Hall, you'll see that used to be a kirk. That was St James's. St James's then moved to the square because by then Brandenburg had started to build. Anyway, get back to the kirk. They built this Chapel of Ease, it was called. That was still the parish kirk out there. This was a Chapel of Ease. Eventually, hardly anybody was going out to that kirk, and they had a try to make this the parish kirk. They waited till the minister was off and had a vote, and then the vote got overturned as soon as the minister discovered what they were up to. And then eventually the folk who were coming about the town and were going to the kirk there decided that that was not enough of a bonny wee thing there. It was quite handy as a mortuary during the Second World War, and the Scouts had it after the war. They decided they would build a grand kirk at the head of the hill, and that's St Ger's. So St Ger's was built about 1900, 1901 I think was it, when they finished it. And that was, you know, that was how the kirk got up there. Nothing to do with the war, of course. Well, it does in its sense, because again, at the start of the war, there was no accommodation. There were no lodgings, there were no huts out there. So soldiers were stuck in various places. The Masonic, the Poles in the Masonic? Poles were in the Masonic. There were soldiers in the St James's Church Hall, because I can still picture Mr Henry down, stamping down the stairs. The soldiers had come in and gone rattling up the stairs with tacky boots while he was doing his sermon. And his sermon was not to be interrupted, promising us fire and brimstone and all the other. I don't think brotherly love actually. Not very often. But you know that for quite some time, this was where the billets were. So any hall and the guide's hut. The guide's hut was occupied to the end of the war, wasn't it?
My church home was where
St Geraldines and all.
Who was in the guide's hut?
And the St Geraldines March.
Soldiers. I can't mind that.
Soldiers up in which was highest church then.
Aye.
And the WBS used to go up one evening a week and mend their clothes. Because my mother went and the soldiers used to go down and lift a carry a machine up for her, you know.
Aye.
A machine.
And you see, lots of other things went on. The WVS, WRVS it became, but it was WVS under the charge of Dr. Cormac. Gertie Cormac. Gertie Cormac ran it. And I can still picture my aunt who looked after me going off to meetings with Gertie. They all loved Gertie. I never really knew her very well. But she appeared to be very, very popular. I think she was a kind of heroine to the woman of Lossie, who she had gone and got qualified in something. I think the irony was that she never actually practiced.
No, she developed TB and she wasn't allowed.
Okay, she developed TB and was forbidden to practice. Okay, so there was the WVS. What else was there that was organised in Lossie for the servicemen?
Canteen.
The canteen. Which canteen? Church of Scotland canteen, which was?
And Stilts, alone, John Thompson's house, isn't it?
John Thompson's house stands more or less there, beside the tennis courts.
That's right.
We used to have tennis courts across there, red glaze tennis courts.
It was opposite the hospital.
And that's where I came off college, raised up. It was on stilts.
That's right.
That was, yeah, they were raised to be level. Across the road, the lodge was actually the isolation hospital. Fever hospital for the camp. At the beginning of the war, the house that looks into the putting green at the Anchor there, that was the sergeant's mess, because my brother Peter took a gym in there to get a cup of tea. Perhaps. Who knows? People did have cups of tea then, didn't they? I mean, suddenly you realise now that young folk have been kidded into believing that you have to have a glass of wine. A cup of tea. Used to go into Peter's for hot orange, Rizzas. Aye. But you know, in those days, young people could actually enjoy themselves without alcohol. Now they have been kidded into believing that you can't enjoy yourself without alcohol. 25 years ago, the brewers developed these things called alco-pops, and the forecast then was that this would result in young people becoming addicted to drink. And they said, oh, wow, no, not true. So, think, you look back, one of the few benefits of growing old is that you've got things to look back to. Poor Loon here's got nothing to look back to. What else we want to do? What have I missed out?
Look at your list.
All hell pages here. What have I forgotten that we did at the school? I mean, it was quite funny during the war that there were plenty of things to do. Now kids have to be in the house to enjoy themselves. I thought it was funny a number of years ago when there was somebody on a show, or a good player, one of these, and they were complaining that they didn't get quality time with their parents. If we were in the company of adults, we regarded it as a wasted day. Adults, stop enjoying yourselves. I saying no. No. Wait, let's just look. Excuse me while I adjust my lenses here. Anderson shelters. Any of you have Anderson shelters? You could get a shelter which you half dug into the ground and put the soil on top. They were curved steel shelters, and you had to pay £5 for them if you earned more than £7 a week. And if you were poor, you got in for nothing. So head 12. And a number of people had them. Sailor had one out in Kimberley Street. Duff Thompson had one. Robert George Cormack next door to me had one. Somebody else? Anybody else remember?
The cooler towel at the gardens at the
Ah,
back.
yes,
Something about the cooler
do you have that? Cuff. So there were sort of 10% of the population maybe had these shelters. And come the time of the raids, you were supposed to go into the shelters. They weren't a height of comfort. So I suspect that we didn't actually go into the shelters. We certainly never went next door to Janet's shelter. Maybe we weren't invited. Maybe we were expendable even then. So there were shelters, but there was an organisation. There was the Home Guard. Now, some of you must have known people who were in the Home Guard. I had a letter once from Rod Mackay. His folk had the Clifton Bar, and Roy used to write things for the Northern Scot. Lossie Loon looks back as now. Bertie Corner, was I in them? He was great friends with Bertie. Roy was in the Home Guard, and he had a rifle, and he took the rifle home, and he had his rifle in the pub, and somebody pulled the trigger, and would you believe it, there'd been a bullet there all the time, and it went into the floor of the pub, and he got a telling off from his mother, and everybody else thought it was quite hilarious after they had changed their undergarments. Earlier on in the war, a soldier had done almost identical thing aboard the Lossie boat, the Cedar, and the shot went through the deck and killed Sandy Slater down below. Mary Slater's father, Nan Slater's father. His body was brought back for the burial in the cemetery. I can mind us playing down at the back of the bath, down the house, and somebody came down and said to Mary and Nan, "Run home as fast as you can, McQueen, your mother needs you." And Mary had long red hair, and Mary was a very good runner, and I can picture her running up there with her hair streaming out the back, and it was to be told that her father was dead. So there were these things that happened, and obviously some of you didn't ken that, but you ken now. And what we're going to do about it, we're going to try and make sure that Lossie has a history, so that when they come back and there's the ruins of the aerodrome there, in 3 weeks, sorry, in 30 years, they'll be able to say, we'll look at Leach and Stewart and Leach. Depends how you split the money.
50-50.
When I did Old Lossie, somebody said to me, oh, you must have been making a fortune. Like somebody says things like that. I said, no, I didn't exactly make a fortune because the royalty goes to the museum. Took the royalty in books, which we gave to the museum, and because the footage were by and large for the museum. I says, I says, and I got £25 expenses by the publisher, and it only cost me about £50 in photocopying. He wasn't convinced. So that a number of years later, when I was selling one of the DVDs, I says, you must be doing well then. I was thinking about money, other folks' money. I said, no, the money goes to Ladybird or the Cancer Sport Group. I said, the profits go to, the profits go, he says, and you could see him. So that if any of you get something from me, I prefer if you give the money direct to Ladybird so that you know it's gone there. Because he said to me, how do we claim the money goes there? I'm against violence in case he hits back. But, it's the kind of thing that you recognise and you say, it's 1% of the population, so don't let them put you off, but it's right annoying. Okay, is the kettle bout?
Well, we're just waiting on them coming.
Okay.
Well, they should be here.
Now, Stephen will tell you what he's going to do next. Stephen.
Hello.
I don't know what I'm going to do next. I just found out what I'm doing just now. But what I'd like you to do, if you can remember something, or like Dolly here, you've harassed your brother, haven't you? And she's just ready to deliver 2 whole pages of information to me in the library. It doesn't have to be 2 whole pages, it could just be a paragraph, it could be some names, it could be a photograph, it could be, Johnny mentioned about the Anderson shelters, it could be the fact somebody had one, like Mrs. Fuberster had one in Willowbank as well, but there's no record that that's there. Because what we're hoping to do with some of these things is to plot them on a map. Defences were here, lodgings were here, innocent huts were here. So there's the whole visual record as well as the written record as well. So do please rifle your photograph albums, rattle your memory, rattle other people, rattle their memories. And let me just write something down, hand in a photograph we can copy. Or just pop in and chat to me or in the library, or Donny as well.
There's nays telling me, and because I'll have forgotten by the time I get up the stairs. There's nays giving me something in writing because I will lose it.
Much as his hands might not be working, Donny's, nothing wrong with Donny's mouth and his video recorder which is sitting just there. So, another way we can always do is just to chat and just to record what you say, and then leave it to me to transcribe it, to write out the details. So I'm more than happy to do that as well. But please, I say, rattle people up, rattle your memories, and see what we can come up with. And hopefully later in the year we'll come round places as well, just to say what we've found out so far. And again, might lead on to more discussion, more information from people.
Because if you do nothing, there'll be nothing. Because there's nothing now.
So there can only be more.
Well done, Stephen.
Okay.
Stephen.
Give me the one. Just give me the one.
You get one too.
So any questions, let's have them.
Any questions asked on
I think the good news is that nobody fell asleep this time.
Okay,